I'm going to start off with this first story because this first story just dropped in my lap earlier today. And look, I understand some of the critiques of people. They're like, call out videos. They're just not very, helpful. Call out videos are they're just blah. And which I agree, 99% of the time. But this 1% time, I got to call, look, there's a reason why I played that clip of Malcolm X in the beginning about talking about black celebrities that are really basically just clowns, because this is clownish behavior. What do I mean? What are we talking about today? Frauds, John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, and then we will get into ESOP versus worker co-op. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is John Legend and his wife, Chrissy Teigen. Now, a lot of people would go, well, what is the significance of who they are or what they did? I mean, they're just celebrities. Like, we all know who they are. But I want to use this as a teachable moment to show you, number one, when it comes to Hollywood, there are no heroes. Now, there may be some that agree with us that actually are fighting or that would be on board, and that's cool. But at the same time, looking to them to be our leaders and our heroes is a complete misstep in actually achieving a more equal and equitable system. Because the system is already doing good for them. And as we can see, and as I will show you, they will not be class traitors. They will not be traitor class because it's good for them. So you're like, JB, what are you talking about? All right, I got you. So, as you all know, the White House Correspondents' Dinner was the other night. And, of course, with the White House Correspondents' Dinner, there's a lot of celebrities that come in there. They come through and they rub shoulders with the corporate and political elite. And technically, the mainstream media is also part of the corporate elite because they're literally owned by corporations. But just as a juxtapose, not even a juxtapose, but it's more of a distinction, is you have the corporate elite, the media elite, and you have the political elite, right? I even hate using the word elite because there's nothing elite about them. It's more greed, but stay with me here. So they were there, but this video I'm about to show is them entering into the White House for the Correspondents' Dinner. And we're going to break this down just a little bit. And I made a tweet responding to this, and I'm going to read that to you just so that you guys can know what exactly I'm talking about. I said, the fact that John Legend and Chrissy Teigen walked past climate activists to support a pro-corporate, pro-pollution president tells you everything you need to know. Nothing they say regarding climate change should be taken seriously anymore. Frauds. Why are people still taking them seriously is beyond me. But this is what happened.
Stand with us.
See in the background, it says Biden, end fossil fuels. You see that in the background? Turning a blind eye, baby. That's what they do.
I'm making family jump in Chicago. How you doing? Take a break, nephew. Planet is dying! Planet is dying!
Also, by the way, she has people holding the back of her dress while she's walking to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, as if she's some princess.
The planet is dying!
Now, I just want to address one thing. Now, not a lot, a few people in the comments in my tweet are addressing Chrissy Teigen's dress, and they're like, oh my God, she's barely wearing anything, blah, blah, blah. Look, here's my thing I'm going to say regarding Chrissy Teigen's dress. I don't care about her dress. I don't care if she was butt naked. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is the fact that she's walking past climate activists, going into a president who is pro pollution, and she is turning a blind eye to them, even though she claims to be in solidarity with people like them. The dress doesn't matter. I don't care if she was booty naked. I don't care. By the way, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the dress actually looks nice. The only problem is I think that John Legend should have stepped his game up as far as his tuxedo is concerned. His tuxedo is blah. But that's just from a fashion standpoint. But who cares, right? The main issue is the fact that they are literally walking past climate activists as if they're not even there. And yet they will feign all this different type of, they will screech to their lungs. John Legend will probably even make a song about climate change if you have a Republican president, but nothing for people like Joe Biden. Nothing. Let's continue. By the way, real talk, I think Keke Palmer probably could have wore that dress better. Just saying. So yes, here they are, just walking past, and you literally have people in the background saying, join us. Let's actually fight for the things that actually matter. See, here's the problem with people like John Legend and Chrissy Teigen. Liberals are just like the GOP. I'm going to repeat myself. Liberals are just like the GOP. There's really no difference. They merely cosplay social justice. They cosplay economic justice. But in reality, they don't do a damn thing. And that's the problem. All right? People will sit here and they'll talk about, oh my goodness, well, he talks out about, what the government's doing in regards to climate change. But I haven't heard a word from him since Biden's been in office. Have you? Here's my thing. Keep that same energy with Biden. The energy you had with Trump, keep that same energy. Actually, I should have. And hang on. Let me put up what I actually said too, because I think this is also relevant. And now I'm going to get into the actual facts about, what's so wrong with what they did. But I also continue. I said, if John Legend and Chrissy Teigen truly believed in taking action against climate change, they would have joined those activists outside and protested in their tuxedo and evening gown. Liberals only cosplay social and economic justice. Meanwhile, they're exactly like the GOP. And this guy comes in and says exactly like No, words have meanings. There's a difference between an imperfect ally and a clear enemy. They're not imperfect allies. They are the enemy. Pied Penguin. They are the enemy because they literally will tell you to your face, oh, well, we're with you. But behind your back, they're actually joining the enemy. Guess what? If they're literally joining the enemy and what's actually what they're doing, then that doesn't mean they're imperfect allies. They are enemies. Talk to me about what an imperfect ally is. Talk to me as a black man, what about an imperfect ally is. Because guess what? You can have somebody that's white and, you know, they may get a couple things wrong. They may say a couple wrong things, but then they shift and they go into the right direction, which is more about, you know, social justice and equality. That's fine. But if you have somebody who claims to be a white ally and then they're joining the racists in what they do and what they say, even though they're saying to you to your face what you want to hear, they are still enemies. The same thing with regards to a lot of the things regarding our social, ecologic, and economic justice that we need, they aren't standing for it. When it push comes to shove, when it actually means something, they don't stand for it. And Pied Penguin, I hope you're watching. Because the thing is that people talk about, oh, they're imperfect allies. No, they're not imperfect allies. They are enemies, because if they were truly imperfect allies, then they would have shifted their focus right when it mattered. But they don't shift their focus when it matters, because they'd rather sit there and eat $1,000 a plate dinner at the White House, glad-handing all these corporate oligarchs and these people who are lackeys for corporate oligarchs, instead of actually standing outside and being with the people who are actually fighting for a brighter future. But they don't. So that means they are still enemies. So this is the problem with a lot of liberals and even some progressives. It's the fact that they will sit there and they will go, oh, well, they're at least trying. No, they're not. No, they're not. Because if they were trying, they would have done it. She would have took off her heels, stood in there, because, you know, those heels probably hurt after standing for a long while. I don't want her feet to hurt. She would have stood out there and been with them. The same thing with John Legend. He would have stood out there. If it was a little bit hot, he would have took off his tuxedo jacket and stood out there and grabbed one of those signs and said, you know what? We don't like what Joe Biden's doing either. We're going to forego the correspondence dinner. That would have made headlines, bro. That would have made so many headlines. And that would have made Joe Biden look bad. And of course, Joe Biden needs to look bad. And people are like, well, what about the Republicans? He is a Republican. Democrats are Republicans and Republicans are Democrats. They are all the same. Nothing is different. Nothing. Because just like the Republicans would have broke the strike for the rail workers, guess what Democrats did? They broke the strike with the rail workers. Guess who's spearheading the Willow Project? Isn't it Joe Biden? Guess who would have also spearheaded the Willow Project? A Republican president. It doesn't matter. So this is the thing. And a lot of people really need to get, with the program and stop thinking. And this is why I responded to him. I said what I said. I said what I said. They are exactly like. Prove to me otherwise in their actions. If you can't, then guess what? I'm right. I don't want to be right, but I am. And that's the problem. Now, let me share this, because people really need to know how egregious this is. And then you cannot take these people seriously. Any of them. This is from biologicaldiversity.org, right? Look at this headline. It says, new data, Biden's first year drilling permits stomps Trump's by 34%. It says new federal data shows that Biden's administration approved 3,557 permits for oil and gas drilling on public lands in his first year, far outpacing Trump's administration first year total of 2,658. Nearly 2,000 of the drilling permits were approved on public lands administered by the Bureau of Land Management's New Mexico office, followed by 843 in Wyoming, 285 in Montana and North Dakota, and 191 in Utah. In California, the Biden administration approved 187 permits, more than twice the 71 drilling permits Trump approved in the state in the first year. Yo, if you guys come here and tell me, oh, well, Biden's a little bit different, like Biden's better than Trump, blah, 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 blah. Facts don't care about your feelings. Guess what? They are exactly the same. So people can go, oh, well, Biden is the lesser of two evils. Is this lesser? I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me blow this up. Is this lesser evil? Lesser? 34% more? Is that lesser? Last time I checked, that was actually more. Quote, Biden's runaway drilling approvals are a spectacular failure of climate leadership. That was said by Taylor McKinnon of the Center for Biological Diversity. Quote, avoiding catastrophic climate change requires ending new fossil fuel extraction, but Biden is racing in the opposite direction because that's the direction he was always going. It's just you guys believe the lie. Y'all believe the lie. And then you guys went against us and said that we were wrong for telling you guys that neither party is good for you because they're going to lead to our destruction. And every single time we said it, people were like, oh, well, would you rather have Trump? Guess what? He's just a lighter skinned Trump. That's it. That's all he is. He's just less orange. That's right. I said it. Orange. He's less orange. And so you guys can talk about, oh, well, one is better than the other, when in reality, I don't see a difference. And you guys need to wake up and start smelling the coffee. Golly, man. And this is what pisses me off. People will say, oh, well, one's better than the other, when in reality, it's not. It says on Wednesday, more than 360 climate conservation, indigenous, environmental justice, and community groups petitioned the Biden administration to use its executive authority to phase out oil and gas production on public lands and oceans. The petition provides a framework to manage a decline of oil and gas production to near zero by 2035 through rulemaking using long dormant provisions of the Mining Leasing Act, Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, and the National Emergencies Act. Without such action, it will become increasingly difficult for the United States to meet its pledge to help avoid 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming and its unprecedented social, environmental, and economic damage. Background, it says peer-reviewed science estimates that a nationwide federal fossil fuel leasing ban will reduce carbon emissions by 280 million tons per year, ranking it among the most ambitious federal climate policy proposals in recent years. Oil, gas, and coal extraction use mines, well past gas lines and roads, and other infrastructure that destroys habitat for wildlife, including threatened and endangered species. Oil spills and other harms from offshore drilling have done immense damage to ocean wildlife and coastal communities. Fracking and mining also pollute watersheds and waterways and provide drinking water to millions of people. Federal fossil fuels that have not been leased to industry contain up to 450 billion tons of potential climate pollution. Those already leased to industry contain up to 43 billion tons. This is one of the biggest problems. And this is why you should not take people like John Legend and Chrissy Teigen seriously. Because they have computers just like me. They can search for these things just like I do. They can find out all this information just like me. But they rather rub shoulders with these monsters instead of joining the people and fighting with them. They don't care. Another article. This is also a big thing that a lot of people seem to forget almost immediately. Alaska's Willow project is controversial. Here's why. The Biden administration is approving a major oil project on Alaska's petroleum-rich North Slope that supporters say represents the economic lifeline for indigenous communities in the region, but environmentalists say it is counter to President Joe's climate goals. This decision on ConocoPhillips' Alaska Willow project and a federal oil reserve roughly the size of Indiana was revealed Monday. What is the Willow project? The project could produce up to 180,000 barrels of oil a day, according to the company, about 1.5% of total U.S. oil production. Willow is currently the largest proposed oil production on U.S. public land. Alaskan Republican U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan said that the development could be one of the biggest, most important resource development projects in our state's history. So that's what's going on top of the drilling permits that was approved by Biden last year. So it just keeps getting worse. And a lot of people will go, well, this is not that bad. As Trump probably would have done worse. No, Trump is probably upset that he isn't doing this right now. So this is from the Willow Project Explained Reasonably. And he's starting off with what is the Willow Project.
So that's what I want to give you all today, is just the information you need to understand the Willow Project. All right, let's start with where this project even is. As you probably heard, it's in far northern Alaska, but more specifically, it's located on a piece of federal public land called the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, the NPRA. The NPRA is 23 million acres and is the single largest piece of public land in America. It was originally established as the Naval Petroleum Reserve number 4 in 1923 by President Warren Harding. It was just that, a naval oil reserve. This was right around the time the U.S. Navy was switching its ships over to petroleum power, and several of these preserves were established in case of an emergency, so the Navy wouldn't run out of oil. You may remember these from the Teapot Dome scandal, which 3 of these reserves were part of. Anyway, let's fast forward to 1976, and the Naval Petroleum Reserve number 4 is transferred from the Department of the Navy to the Department of the Interior, where it came under the management of the Bureau of Land Management and renamed to the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska. Again, the NPRA. After the transfer, there were 2 laws which authorized oil and gas exploration on the reserve, subject to the proper administrative procedures. The Naval Petroleum Reserves Production Act of 1976 and the Department of Interior Appropriations Act of 1981. Now, even after these authorizations, there wasn't a lot of drilling on the reserve. The land remained relatively undisturbed, serving as the home for millions of birds, one of the largest caribou herds on Earth, musk ox, Arctic fox, wolves, grizzly and polar bears, moose, seals, whales, and walruses, as well as, of course, native Alaskans. In fact, there are 4 special areas, that's actually what they're called, there are 4 special areas within the reserve that are supposed to be managed so that any oil exploration is, quote, conducted in a manner which will assure the maximum protection of such surface values to the extent consistent with the requirements of this act for the exploration of the reserve. These areas are the Teshekpuk Lake, Colville River, Utahcock Highlands, and the Kasagalik Lagoon. Essentially, these are sensitive areas which are supposed to be treated with a little more scrutiny when it comes to decision making. Again, this all takes place on the NPRA, and this is the backdrop on which the Willow Project is now the subject of debate. Now, The Willow project will be developed by ConocoPhillips on the far eastern perimeter of the NPRA, near the native village of Nuksut. As originally proposed, the Willow project would have included 5 drilling pads and a total of 250 oil wells, but as currently approved, it will include 3 drilling pads and 199 wells. The project will include development within 2 of those special areas I mentioned above, the Teshikpuk Lake and the Colville River. And even with this size reduction, this will still be the largest oil extraction project ever undertaken on federal public lands. The Willow project is estimated to cost between $8 and $10 billion and generate around 186,000 barrels of oil per day, totaling 576 million barrels over the course of its 30-year development cycle. Oil is not expected to be extracted from the site for another 8 to 10 years. It will disturb just under 500 acres of area on the surface and will, of course, require the construction of infrastructure typically associated with oil extraction. This includes hundreds of miles of pipelines and roads, both gravel and ice, an airstrip, a gravel mine, a processing facility, which includes a 98 megawatt power plant, lots of heavy machinery, and lots of vehicles. All right, next let's move on to a timeline of how we got where we are. 1999, ConocoPhillips obtains their first leases to extract oil in the NPRA in the area that would ultimately become the Willow project. 2015, ConocoPhillips discovers massive oil deposits within their lease area. In 2018, they begin the process of obtaining permits to drill for oil, and in 2020, the Trump administration issues an environmental impact statement approving the original 5-pad proposal. In 2021, this approval was vacated by the District Court of Alaska and sent back to the BLM for 3 reasons. 1, they didn't include global greenhouse gas emissions in their calculations. 2, they improperly assumed that the leases held by ConocoPhillips entitled them to extract, quote, all possible oil. And 3, they didn't afford, quote unquote, maximum protection for the Teshikpuk Lake Special Area. So BLM goes back, addresses the court's concerns, and in July of 2022 issues another environmental impact statement, and in February of this year issues their final decision. President Biden then approves the project on March 13th. All right, now let's talk about the Biden administration's rationale here. A lot of people have been wondering why this administration would have approved a project like Willow, given his campaign promises.
No more drilling on federal lands, no more drilling, including offshore. No.
He knew he was lying at that point. Y'all knew he was lying at that point. He knew, and y'all knew. Yet, some people, some liberals were like, well, he's the pro-science president. And yet, now, he's going the exact direction as the people who you guys deem, well, not y'all, but a lot of liberals deem as the fascist president. I'll put it to you this way. If it walks like a fascist, talks like a fascist, and acts like a fascist,
No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period.
And the commitments his administration has already made to tackle climate change, such as the Inflation Reduction Act. According to several legal experts, the Biden administration might have had its hands tied, legally speaking. Because ConocoPhillips has owned these leases since the late 1990s, they have essentially a legal right to develop them.
But that's because of the whole system, right? That's because the system is the way it's set up. And ultimately, whenever we talk about upending the system and making it more better, more equal, more equitable, that also includes the laws and the courts. Because the thing is that if they're not going to do right by us, then they're really illegitimate as far as I'm concerned. They really have no authority, really, as far as the people is concerned. They're in place to legitimize the corporations and what they want to do. That's all they're really there for. They're not really there to fight for us or to provide justice for what we want as a people.
this line of thinking goes, the Biden administration didn't want to challenge that right in court and undertake a multi-billion-dollar taxpayer-funded lawsuit only to see the project approved anyway. Instead, again, according to the Biden administration, they decided to move forward with a scaled-down project and impose additional restrictions on oil exploration elsewhere in the NPRA. This includes...
It's funny because they didn't want to use taxpayer-funded. These are the same federal government that took billions and billions and billions of dollars to prop up the stock market. Why don't you just use the same type of, means that you did to prop up the stock market and take some of that money and then go ahead. Yeah, do the lawsuits. Go ahead. Push Congress to change the laws. Oh, but yeah, no, we can't do that. It's going to be too much taxpayer-funded money. We can't do. No, we just gotta go ahead with it. I'm sorry. Just gonna have to suffer. Dear God.
Includes the elimination of 2 of the 5 originally proposed wells, one of which would have posed a significant threat to the aforementioned Teshekpok Lake. By their own admission, this will reduce the amount of fresh water needed for the project and eliminate 11 miles of roads, 20 miles of pipelines, and 133 acres of gravel. Also, 68,000 acres of ConocoPhillips leases will be returned to the federal government. In addition to the size reduction, the Biden administration will limit or restrict oil drilling on an additional 13 million acres within the NPRA, as well as 3 million acres offshore in the Beaufort Sea planning area.
I honestly do not believe that they're going to allow that to continue. They honestly are just going to they're going to turn a blind eye. Watch. They're going to look the other way. That's honestly what I think.
98% of which has already been protected under the Obama administration. It is worth noting here, though, that these actions are subject to change under future administrations. These are not permanent protections. All right.
See what I said? God, I hate being correct on these things.
So that's the Willow project in terms of what was approved, what will be built, and what will be extracted. Now, let's talk about who is in favor of the project and why, and who is opposed to the project and why. Let's start with the proponents. Of course, the oil and gas industry, particularly ConocoPhillips, is in favor of the project. They stand to make billions of dollars here, so no need to go into too much detail on that one. In addition, Alaska's entire bipartisan congressional delegation, including Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan, as well as Democratic Representative Mary Peltola, who is the first Alaska Native ever elected to Congress, are all in support of the project, as well as...
By the way, just because she's an Alaskan Native, like we Black people know, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Let's just be real. How many people who are indigenous probably would be condemning that person for making a decision and supporting something like that?
Several unions. Many indigenous communities, including the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, are in favor of the project. There are indigenous communities opposed to the project as well, but we'll talk about them in a minute. Now, in general, the arguments in favor of the Willow project tend to be economic. They talk about the need to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, particularly from authoritarian states like Russia and Saudi Arabia, and about the revenue and jobs the project will provide to local communities. According to the Bureau of Land Management, the Willow project will generate 2,500 jobs and up to $17 billion in federal tax revenue. The Naval Petroleum Reserves Production Act states that 50% of this revenue is required to be distributed to the state of Alaska. The act also stipulates that priority for that funding is required to go to the communities most affected by development, i.e. those closest and most impacted by the Willow project. In addition...
But will it really, though? Is that really going to go to them? And By the way, if you punched me in the face and then give me money from my medical bills or some of my medical bills afterwards, would I rather get punched in the face and then have to use that money to go to the doctor, or would I rather just not get punched in the face? I'd rather just not get punched in the face. See what I mean? Would you rather in your car get hit by a car and then somebody pay you for the damages, or just not get hit by another car? See the reasoning here? I'd just rather not get hit. And yet they're like, well, we're gonna give you guys some of the proceeds, but you're still damaging overall the ecology of the area. You're still damaging our environment. You're still making it so that the future is bleak for our kids and grandkids. Never mind giving us a few bones, while we're subjecting the future generations to a planet that they can't inhabit.
A fiscal analysis by the state of Alaska concluded that the project could generate over $5 billion for the state, $1 billion for the North Slope Borough, and $4 billion for the local communities most affected by Willow, all by the year 2053. All right, now let's talk about those who are opposed to the Willow project and why. This includes most environmental organizations and activists, as well as a few indigenous communities, including the village of Nuksut, the community closest to where Willow will be taking place.
Now, as that, Nuksut, the village that is close by, just to address this person, Rick Bungle says, dude, who cares what happens in Northern Alaska? The Nuksut people do. Also, while I'm at it, if I knew in my house that there was some dangerous gas, right, that was being let out in one room in a house that nobody really goes in, I can go, who cares what happens in that room? Nobody ever goes in there. But the problem is it can still affect the entire house being our planet. See what I mean? See, that's the thing. And see, this is the type of thinking. Don't be like this person, because that's the type of thinking is, I got mine. Fuck all y'all. You go get yours. No. Because the thing is, you're taking, you're basically saying that the rest of the planet doesn't matter as long as it doesn't directly affect you. But it does. It does. So what are you talking about, right? Then you continue with this shitty ass take, says nobody even lives there anyway. The Nuksut people do. A lot of animals that are really essential to our biodiversity do. Come on. Are you serious right now? Did you really come in to this chat to say all that BS? And not realize the fact that you're going to be indirectly affected no matter what. Tell me you don't care about the rest of humanity in this planet without telling me you don't care about humanity or the rest of this planet. Are you for real right now? And tell me you don't care about the indigenous Nuksut people in that area without telling me you don't care about them. Oh yeah, fuck them. By the way, the Nuksut people are your cousins. Every single person on this planet is related to each other one way or another. So that's literally your cousins. And you're saying, oh, fuck them. Gonna doom us all to hell, man. I'm telling you.
The opposing argument you've most likely heard is about climate. Environmental organizations are calling the project a carbon bomb, which, when all the oil is extracted, used, and burned, will generate 239 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, or an equivalent thereof, over 30 years, roughly 9.2 million tons annually. To give you some perspective, the United States generates 5.6 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. Opponents state that approving the Willow project only further increases our dependence on fossil fuels and locks us into more carbon emissions at a time when we should be focusing on reducing our carbon emissions as much as possible. In addition, the BLM's own analysis predicts effects that are quote-unquote long-term and of high intensity for the region's indigenous communities, particularly the village of Nuksut. This includes a negative impact on these communities' ability to conduct subsistence hunting, which forces them to eat store-bought food, which is more expensive, less nutritious, and further contributes to food scarcity in the region. This is not to mention the fact that subsistence hunting is a cultural practice these communities have carried out for thousands of years. The analysis
is really partially indigenous erasure. That's really what it is. Like, let's be real. It's erasure of indigenous communities to Alaska. You know what else we call erasure of a people? We call it genocide.
Analysis also notes that the inability to practice their subsistence lifestyle, as well as air and noise pollution and overall stressful conditions, could lead to negative public health outcomes like anxiety and depression. The BLM acknowledges that these impacts are already being felt, stating, quote, rapid modernization and development, as well as other multiple stressful conditions, including significant changes in diet, housing, and traditional culture, has led to negative health outcomes, including suicide, end quote. Overall, quote, the effects on subsistence and sociocultural systems may be highly adverse and disproportionately borne by the Nuksut population.
Genocide. Genocide. At a slow pace.
End quote. Other concerns include the potential for negative impacts on wildlife like caribou and migratory birds, the potential for thawing permafrost to induce equipment failures and subsequent oil and gas leaks, localized air and water pollution, and as with any oil extraction project, the possibility of a damaging spill in an ecologically sensitive area. Okay, that is the Willow project. Everything you need to know to be informed and make your own decision on how you feel about it. Now, I promised I would let you know my own thoughts on Willow. And if you followed my channel long enough, I don't think it should come as any surprise that I am opposed to it. The things I value most, wildlife conservation, landscape conservation, protection of public lands, a transition away from fossil fuels, and a healthy environment, are directly negatively impacted by the Willow project, and I can't support it. That being said, I also cannot fault those who do support it. I look at those numbers, thousands of jobs and billions of dollars for communities that have already been left behind, and I can't blame them for wanting to benefit from something we have for so long already profited from. I think it sucks that we are in a system where the communities that will be most impacted by Willow and projects like it are the same ones who are reliant on it to feed their families and sustain their livelihoods.
This is why the system needs to be upended. That is why we need to get rid of the system at large, because the thing is that it forces us to rely upon it in order for us to survive, even though it's literally killing us. It's a raw deal. It's a raw deal.